Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to the Good Morning Education Show. It's a wonderful Friday morning, and it's such an honor and privilege to be the host of today's show. If you've been on the show before, you will know that these are quite big shoes to fill in, but I'll try my best. So my name is Grace Amoka, and I'll be your host for today. Our our general overseer is on sabbatical. I hope that he gets to join us during the course of the show. So you're welcome this morning. Please let's know your name and where you're joining in from. I'm calling from the beautiful city of Kaduna, Kaduna to the world, Kaduna to Africa and Nigeria. And it's so good to be with you this morning. Usually on this show, we talk about real issues that affects the education sector, and we have real people that join in these conversations and prefer solutions to the numerous challenges that the education sector faces. So you're in for a very swell time. If your neighbors are not on the show yet, please call your neighbors. Everybody come out to. If your friends, family, enemies are not here, call them as well. Because I know we're going to have a fantastic time, especially that today is Friday. I'm so excited. It's been such a very long week. And I look forward to all the things we're going to talk about today. And our topic for today is, are we working or talking? And we usually have some amazing analysts on the show that shed light, on the topic. So as soon as they come in, you're going to be listening to them as they share their wealth of knowledge. But first off, let's go into the news for today. So we'll have the news for today and we'll have our analysts discuss the news, and then we'll just dive right in to the topic. So the news for today. Can we have the news for today, please? Okay. Okay. So I guess I'll just have to read that out. So we have Nigerian man bags PhD in Korea. He takes his wife and kids to the ceremony and shares amazing photos. We'll share the links with you. Mathematics should not be a compulsory subject for humanities. And this is the JAM registrar talking about that. There's a proud mom of 4 kids mocked as a baby making machine gets award for best thesis in Nigeria. Interesting. And then there is Unilag sanctions 900 post UTME candidates for flouting rules features. So the ones that really catch my attention, and I hope our analysts join us soon, is there's one that talks about stakeholders to renew call for regulation against sexual harassment. And the reason that you know kind of excited about it is because we through the week we talked about developing the education sector. And one of the things we talked about is how advocacy is important in developing the sector. So having, stakeholders call for certain regulations sounds like progress to me. So I don't know if we have any of our analysts around, so we talk about this. And then, of course, mathematics should not be a compulsory subject for humanities, the JAM registrar declares. I'm not very sure how I feel about that yet, but I hope that our analysts join us soon to have a conversation about this. Before they come in, I'll just take us through some of the highlights of the sessions that we had through the week. So we talked about developing the education sector. And one of the things that stood out for me was the importance or the role of leadership in developing the sector. We talked about leadership being about service, leadership being about seeing a need and just stepping up to meeting the need. Leadership not being about bossing people around or being the loudest voice in the room, but by showing modeling what you want people that you work with to emulate. We also talked about the power of a vision, having a shared vision. So within the school community that you work, within the education sector that we work, is important that we have a shared vision, because this will help in achieving you know the goals that we have set. We talked about collaboration as a tool for growth and development, because we know that there are lots of education um people, like a lot of small groups in education doing fantastic work. Just imagine what would happen if we could come together and harness the power that we have. So rather than just having little drops of water in the ocean, how about we just storm the entire place and then work together and make our demands as stakeholders in the education sector. So those are the things that we talked about through the week. We also had the BAP Foundation come to share with us the amazing work that they're doing. And I see Fing in the studio. Woo! Good morning, Fing. Thank you for rescuing me. How are you doing this Friday morning?
Very well, thank you. How are you doing too?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Welcome to the show. I've been giving such huge shoes to fill, and I hope that I do, an okay job. So I was just going through what we discussed through the week, and if you don't mind, I'd like you to just share some of the insights that we shared as well, and just let our viewers know, the fantastic work we've been working on and then we've been talking about. So, being over to you, just a recap of what we've done through this week.
Okay, so we have talked about, maybe I start from the closest to, or as I remember them. We have talked about developing the sector, and had live had guests come in, talk about the foundation, what they're doing. We have talked about um sorry, I'm trying to remember the headlines just the way they are now. But yesterday we talked about developing a system and making the system. How do we make the system work? And we talked largely. I think one thing that has stood out this week is collaboration. There's the need for all industry players to collaborate, to work together, pull resources together, and speak with one voice, speak with a united voice, and present one objective. So I will just summarize what we have done all through the week with that, because it kept recurring from day to day, how that is going to help us go forward, how that is going to help us build a more stable and functional system.
Thank you so much, Fing. And I see Miss Rhoda in the house as well. Welcome, Miss Rhoda, our very um, deep analyst. It's great to have
Ah,
you morning.
thank
And
you.
I think this is
Good
the first time we're
morning.
meeting. Yes,
Absolutely.
it's
Unfortunately,
such an
yeah,
honor
absolutely.
to.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really just want to apologize first for being unavailable throughout this week and work. But this is great. It's great to see you. Great to see your face,
I
make your acquaintance,
understand.
as they say.
Great to see you too. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so in the news today, we have stakeholders renew call for regulation against sexual harassment. And based on some of the things we discussed when we talked about advocacy in the sector, stakeholders being able to come together and raise one voice together, concerning some of the issues that we face in the education space. And for me, when I saw this news, I was like, oh, wow, sounds like a great development. So I'd like to hear your thoughts about it, Fee. the call for regulation against sexual harassment. Does it sound like a good development in the right direction?
Yes, I think it's been a long time coming. We should have had this discussion much earlier than now. We should have had this move, this step taken much earlier than now. Maybe we would have had less incidents of sexual harassment. Maybe we would have had less incidents of suicide or from depression or from carrying the shame. Maybe we would have had less incidents of students failing their courses for no reasons. Maybe we would have had less of people in that willed power now as teachers, as lecturers, both male and female. Maybe we would have had them wield less of that power and be more responsible in carrying out their duties without feeling, oh, well, because I have the power to make you pass or make you fail, I'm going to have you stay here. We would have had less of these things over time. We would have had people see that for every action there is a consequence. We would have had people understand that when you do things, it's not you can't just do things with impunity. You can't just do it and feel, well, nothing is going to happen to me, and just get away with it. We would have had less um, children and students now generally having to go on into life carrying the burden of abuse, carrying the burden of being violated. So yes, it is a step in the right direction, and I won't say a step coming a little too late, but all the same, very welcome development.
I, I Yes, I totally support, what you said. Once people are held accountable, and I think that's one thing that is lacking in our system in this country. Once people are not held accountable for their actions, other people see and they're like, oh, it's something we can get away with. So I'm so excited about this. And I hope that it's not just a call. It doesn't end at just being just a call, but then like there are actions that follow that call. And then the other news that I'm like, what's going on? So the JAM registrar says that mathematics should not be compulsory for humanities. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Ms. Rhoda. What do you think about it? So, the guy is saying mathematics should not be a compulsory subject for humanities. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is very, very well suited into my world, like where we look into curriculum issues and curriculum topical movements that is key. I think what he's saying is actually in the right direction. I only wish that he there was a little um there was a deep dive into what he was saying, because math as a concept in itself is critical to life, and there's no argument about what happens with our brains. We are all doing some one kind of mathematics or the other, so it's a functional skill. And so what I was hoping to hear is what sort of pathways should be compulsory. So, for instance, a branch of mathematics is quantitative reasoning, very key for anybody going into university, going to the workplace, and things like that. What problems? There are concepts. Some questions have been asked, like myself as a student of humanities, should I have the same math requirements or with someone who's doing engineering or computer science or accountancy or those kinds of things? And the straight answer there is no. You don't actually need to have the same math credits. What you do need to have is like what I would call just like your minimum requirements in the math, and it should start from secondary school, where there are various math pathways. We're seeing it in certain countries where some children stop at taking algebra 1 and not proceed to take algebra 2, because their pathway is for those who go into algebra 2 have a different pathway. So I think that the reform is needed right from secondary education towards the the final years of secondary education. But his thoughts are certainly in the right direction. I just wish, you know how news headlines are, they're never really that critical to what the person is thinking of. So I don't want to be too analytical of what he's saying, but I think he's certainly in the right direction. I can't go and study creative arts and be expected to have the same credits for entry. But I do know that if you were some universities in Nigeria, if you're going to do engineering, your mathematics can, if you have a C, they're likely not to take you. So I understand that there's variations, but it needs to be a really strong uh, reform there to ensure that everybody has opportunity to go and study what resonates with their skill sets.
Oh, I think I've even learned from this. The I think it was last week we were talking about how Albert Einstein, everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to swim, or by its ability to fly, and a bird by its ability to swim, it will end, up all its life thinking that it's stupid. And so in the whole curriculum, because when I hear you speak, I'm hearing it seems like there's a lot of work to be done. How far do you think we have come? In terms of our curriculum being in the right shape, for the
um,
kind of employed graduates we want to produce, the kinds of leaders we want to produce in our country. How far have we come? What's our scorecard on this?
don't even ask me for that scorecard because I'm just going to put it somewhere that is not so palatable. But I do think that we're not at a bottom, like we're not doing really badly. I won't give us an F. I won't give us an E. I think that there's a lot we can do to improve. Um, we're still far away from where we should be. I mean, we can spend the whole hour talking about the different components of what we should have done by now. Um, but yeah, I feel like
Mhm.
if I was going to give us a rating, it won't be more than 5/10, and that's because we've gone this far. And we've sustained a particular system that ultimately has worked. And again, if you think about it from an international outlook, Nigerian kids are not doing badly, especially people taking this level, taking the kind of education, like the rigor in our education system that doesn't necessarily allow you to express yourself or find yourself in the school system, because that's what you're forced into, career paths because of the limitation of options. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot more to do, to be honest, and we can spend so many hours talking about it, but there's a whole lot more to do.
Yeah, yeah, I believe so too. Thank you so much, Ms. Rhoda. And so that's the news for today. You can check the other details of the news after the show. So we'll just dive right to the topic of today, which is, are we working or are we talking? In other words, someone is telling us, if you want to shoot the gun, just shoot the gun already and stop all these plenty talks. And I'll just like to know, Fee, what do you think? Do you think we're talking too much? That's what we have on the Good Morning Education show. We're having conversations after conversations. What do you think is the place of conversations in doing the work? Do you think we're talking too much? I'd like to hear everyone's thoughts on this. So let's go with Fee first.
Okay, I don't think we're talking too much. I think we're talking in the right direction. I think we're communicating. I think we're flagging issues as they come up. I think we're setting agenda. I think we are rubbing minds. For all we know, there are people who have been following, even if it's for 1 week, even if it's for one day, who have followed some of the topics and have made a decision to take steps from that. So yes, and even amongst us, we have programs going on, we have steps being taken, we have action being taken, not just talk and talk. We're not just holding the gun and threatening to shoot. We're not just holding the gun and threatening, oh, okay, well, one day I'm going to use this gun. But really, we are shooting. So I think we are working and we are talking, we are balancing, and we are creating an equilibrium place for both talk and work. because really there may not be so much to work on if there is nothing if we're not talking about it. So we've talked a lot about collaborations, and I see collaborations springing up, even if we're not immediately aware of it. See a lot of that springing up, but people probably there might not have been thoughts in that direction if the talk had not come up. So yes, we're doing the talk that is necessary for the work to happen.
Oh wow. For giving us punchlines this morning. We're doing the talk that is necessary for the work to happen. I really, really love that. Ms. Rhoda, what do you think? Are we talking too
Uh,
much? What are your thoughts?
um, I like this quote that my husband normally uses. He'll say that he says that innovation does not thrive in the midst of plenty. About and what that just reminds me of in this conversation is like, does it feel like we have plenty talk? Um, and I don't think so. I don't think there's too much talk. I just feel like there's scarcity of the real conversations that we should have. For instance, when we talk about corruption and how it affects everything that we do in this country, in Nigeria, and in Africa and beyond. Um, there is not enough driving, I mean, honest conversations. Sometimes, and this is just my personal opinion, and then this is again Nigeria specific. People, too many. There's far too much talk that doesn't really um it hits the nail on the head. Let me give one quick example that's I've been worried about. A lot has been talked about the Fulani headsmen and the migration and the killings and the fights and all of that. Now I hear all the clamor and all the complaints and all the deaths, and those are very very sad, very things that we should definitely work on. But I have been concerned particularly that the real problem is climate change, is is desertification. And if that is the real problem, why is it not part of the conversation? Because there's a reason why these guys are moving around to graze, right? Because they need to feed their animals and they need to do business. And so if where they are located at does not have that, then how are they going to they must survive, they will move, you know and that's part of the conversation. I'm not saying that's all of the conversation. I'm saying that that's part, and it's a critical component of it that says, okay, are we going to now create like ranches for states? Do we have state ranches and allocate lands and this? What do we do? What are the specific things being done to curb or to help the situation? So I feel like conversations are we've not had the most critical conversations yet, but I do think that conversations have been driving it planting ideas and giving people opportunities to dream. And once they dream, they see what is possible. And when people come together to share ideas, a lot of times it leads to actionable things. How much of what we're doing, or how much we're actioning, is a separate conversation. But I think definitely we should be walking and talking at the same time.
Hmm. Thank you so much. So walking and talking has to go hand in hand. And I really love what you said, Miss Rhoda, but I'd like to really understand your so I hear you say we're not having the critical kinds of conversations that we should be having. And if you had asked me this question, I probably would have said, oh, I feel like we're hitting the nail on the head. How do we get to the critical elements? How do we get to identify that, oh, these are the critical elements of what we should be addressing? Because like I hear you say, we're just kind of like touching on the symptoms without getting to the root causes of the problem. So how do we get like deep into the root causes?
Okay, I'll say two or three things. The first one, which is always my key thing, is data collection and analysis, basically data mining. Every time you want to have a conversation, you need to find out the facts, not assumptions, not preconceptions, not misconceptions,
mm,
the facts. And the fact you can only get the facts if you mine the data. So go and search, ask questions, ask the right questions. Fulani Hesman, what is your problem? And you break it down to the specific needs. I've seen a lot of data. I've seen, well, so a couple of people collect data from my research experience, and they're not also still not asking the right questions. You want to find out the impact of climate change on this, and your questions are already asking what I just said. What is your problem? You are not asking. Don't you are already accusing. Is accusation is accusatory. How do you speak English? But asking the right questions and going for the hard facts. That's one thing. So it's data collection. Oh, how many people are affected? Where are they affected? What is the outcome of the basic questions that any good research will carry out. That's one way to know how to drive conversations, because then now you're working with the numbers and the impact, and that way you know what the real needs are. The second thing for me is in trying to drive out come up with in driving this conversation is a thought partnership, and looking out for the experts. Many times you have conversations in the space, and you want it's kind of saying you're putting a square peg in a round hole. It's absolutely wrong. You don't do that.
mm,
You have to fit people in the right places. Where do they belong? You can't have a minister of education that has politics, that has his background as a lawyer, and who has mostly done being a politician. It's wrong. So placing
mm,
the round is a round peg in a round hole is the exact way to do. Let people fit into their their job descriptions, and that's because they have the expertise, the experience, and the wherewithal to go and drive real conversations that lead to real work. Let me just leave it at those two. I think those two work for me. Putting people in the right places, because that involves equipping them and with the authority to build their constituency, as the word may be, let me just use that word, because when someone is capable of doing what they need to do in their space, you find them bringing out their very best. And then, of course, going for data. Data will always point you to the
mm,
right direction. It will always point you to the right direction. And then you should then finally match it with honesty. Be honest about what you're doing. Yeah, that's
mm,
that's that's for me what it will be.
mm. Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Rhoda, for this very, boost contributions. And I'd like to also hear your thoughts. What do you think is the bridge from? So we've agreed that we need to talk and work at the same time. What closes that gap? From the talking to the working. What's that missing element that you see that we need to focus our efforts more on? Between talking and working. Think.
Okay, as Ms. Rhoda has said, she has really hit the nail on the head this morning. So
Mm,
I would say that we're not just talking this morning. We're actually now going to the base. We're going to the roots of the kind of talk and the kind of actions that we need to have. So when we talk about developing the sector, and we just skirt around it and not really, maybe out of, well, it could be out of a mindset, because sometimes would I would cons- I would sincerely say that there are times that I think about some of the actionable steps that need to be taken. I just feel, look, we've been saying these things for ages and nothing is changing. But then we need, if we really want to match
mm,
our talk with the work, then there's a need for us to actually dig down into what exactly do we need to be talking about? What exactly do we want to see change? So maybe our talk will be driven by what exactly we need to see changed. there's a problem with the curriculum. What exactly is the problem with the curriculum? Do we want to bring it up to 21st century standards? Do we want to keep it where it's always been? Do we want to just fashion out our own mode of education? Do we want to have our own niche and say, okay, this is what we want to focus on in our education? Or do we want our education sector to be able to compete globally? So knowing exactly
Mm,
what we want to change, knowing exactly the actions that we ought to take. I think just putting it in mind that, okay, if bar any form of obstacle, if we had the resources to do everything, what would we do? That should help us to go into the real talk. And once the real talk is on and is going on, then the next thing we'll be looking for is those who would implement the talk. So we won't just have everything out there and we're saying so much and we're putting so much out there and there is really nobody to work it. And from what Ms. Rhoda said, which is really true, we probably don't even have enough people to work it because we don't have the data. So we don't know how many people, we don't know how many um,
mm,
level officers we need to do this. We don't know how many skilled hands we need to execute that. Everything is just up in the air. We just keep saying, no, 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 we just know something is not fine, but we really do not know what is not fine. Or we would like to get from point A to point B, and we really do not know how we're going to get there. So all of those things have to come together. We put together the data. We have people to work the system. Along the line, we're also training for people to walk to walk the talk, to work it out now and be committed to it. Honesty, integrity, all of those things
mm,
are things that we need to balance, to bring our work to meet our talk and to marry both of them together.
Sorry to jump in. I just really like what Fiyin said. And when I was talking about round holes and round pegs, what I meant there was leadership. Like the quality of leadership we have usually, and anybody who's
mm,
leading. And when we say leadership, people often misinterpret it as if, oh, you have to be a president, or you have to be a governor, you have to be whoever is talking is a manager, is a leader of some
mm,
sort, trying to make sure that they do what is right. And usually, when you have the right peg and the right hole, he knows to look for his data. He also knows to try to make sure that he creates policies and processes that make his work it become his talk become work. And then of course funding is key. The reason why a lot of people talk, yes, but sometimes they cannot
mm,
do the work because they don't have the funding for it. And so a couple of things have to tie together for this as well. So people with great ideas, and then it's time to execute. Oh, I don't have the money for it. And then they go looking for support from banking
mm,
systems, and then and people will give you the first thing which is why I applauded I continue to applaud the Tony Elumelu Foundation, even for the work that they do, because they invest in ideas, and
mm,
and to just help people launch their ideas and go into doing the actual work. And I am an alumni, and I know how many small businesses have been birthed from it, and people
mm,
solving real problems out of it. And for sometimes in our own case, like let me give you a quick story around why data is king. Sometimes, many times, when the pandemic hit, and then we were trying to solve the problem for how do we ensure that children are learning whilst they're at home for families living in underserved communities. And we said, oh, you know what, the minimum access to any form of learning would have to be having study packets. And then in addition, what can we do to help children receive assessment, get some assessment that's self-driven or family driven? And we created WhatsApp quizzes. Believe me, the penetration was still at 25%, of the total population. And guess why? That was because not even where there's data, where there is sorry, where there is smartphones, there is no data. Where there is data, it is used for various
mm,
kinds of things with no real interest
mm,
for learning. Because you could almost say, oh, how many parents really within those people who would then have data really want to engage their children on WhatsApp? Maybe they just want to look at Facebook and chat with their friends. There's so many things there. So you now start to think, okay, how do I drive, that solution to reach the child at all times? And then we found out that even when we said, okay, feature phones versus smartphones, okay, how can we make this thing work for feature phones? Guess what? That was the period, just before the pandemic hit. The NCC had retrieved the license for mobile phones for feature phones, that is non smartphone smartphones, to be able to use something they call SF, forgotten what's called, but being able to generate responses from SMSs and all of that. They had retrieved it, and you would think that for during a pandemic period that should have been brought back, to help families to access learning,
Mm,
but that didn't happen. And so there's so many things we found out from it that I've learned. Now, did we do the talk? Yes, we had the conversations, the meetings, the planning, the processes, everything. The plans, the work plans.
mm,
Yes. Did we implement talk, the work? Yes, we did. What were the results? And then we started learning on the job and say, okay, this is where it is. And what did we stop? Study packets. Taking the learning to the children and creating MP3 audio, personalized MP3 players that actually took audio lessons to the children and made it personalized. Now, of course, we can talk about how to power it and all of that. That's a separate conversation, but at least we had the children learning and listen and some. So there are so many things that come in this about the key things are data leadership, investment, or funding. And Titi is here, isn't that?
Hello, good morning.
Hi.
yes.
I'm so sorry that I'm really late. My sincere apologies.
Welcome,
Good morning.
Titi.
You're
Good
Yes,
welcome.
morning.
I can see that it's an all women's affair. We finally were able to kick Rotimi out. Rotimi, when you hear the replay, we are laughing
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
at you. Yeah, but
Titi.
yes, I like the
Good
topic. I was
morning,
listening.
Titi.
Good morning. I was listening as Finya and Rhoda was speaking. Are we walking or are we talking? I think we've answered that by
Hmm.
saying we don't have sufficient we don't have sufficient data to know which one we are doing. Oh my!
Oh my.
I'm telling
Oh
you,
my.
sometimes sometimes that's really the truth. Just listening to what Rhoda was saying, it's only in small groups that we know if anything that we are doing is really working. And what we've learned over and over again is that sometimes after you've done the talk, it's till you really start it, then you'll be able to know if it's going to work. You can have grand plans on paper, cross all your T's and dot your I's. But honestly, till you take it out there to the people that are it's needed, and you then measure, because you can take it out there. Like she said, send out the work packets, tell them this is the group for them to join, this is what they need to do. But if you don't measure the effectiveness, then you wouldn't know. So a lot of the talking needs to convert to working, and then when you check, you just need to check. And I think that's what we've not done a lot of, or we don't have that discipline of doing. So there's a lot of things that were done for the COVID TV. This who has come back and told us, you know what, during that period, these are the number of people that logged on. These are the number of views that we had. This is how it was steadily, whether it rose or whether it dropped. So anything we are doing, if we are not measuring it, we don't really know. Which is why there are always all these assessment tests at the end of a period, because you just need to measure. And the idea of measuring, I always tell people, is not to give someone a knock on the head. It's really for you to know what's working, what's not working, and then to make an adjustment. Is the child learning or the child is not learning? What adjustment do we need to do? So I think I will stop there. Who is our typist that is really
Thank you
In
so
fact,
much,
exercising?
Titi.
Oh my goodness. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, yes. So thank you so much for that. So there's been a lot of conversations. For those of you that just joining us, we've been having conversations around, are we working or talking? Has the talk become too much? And from our very intelligent analysts, I've gathered that we need to keep working as we talk. talk because, like Titi just said, we need to measure along the way to know what is working and what is not. I had a similar experience um, when, like the pandemic hit and we had to work with children from low income communities. So, of course, everybody came up with their bright, shiny ideas. Oh, let's take this down, online learning. And then, of course, we realized that the parents didn't have smartphones. And then we're like, okay, so what next can we do? So, like Ms. Rhoda said, we need to understand, drill down to know what are the lower hanging fruits. Innovation means different things for different communities. So for us as well, so we did the same distribution of paper packets to the kids, and then weekly we would get them back and assess them. So talk is not exactly so cheap. It's cheap talk that is cheap, but we need to keep talking as we work. I would like to also, based on what Rhoda said about, critical things we need to be talking about. So I'd like to, just have your opinions. I think that's the final thing we're going to do before we call it a day. What do you think are the top three things that we need to continue to drive conversations in, especially in the space of education? So there are lots, we know that there are lots of um, issues surrounding the development of our sector, as we had conversations about through the week. But what would you say are if there are three things that stand out for you that you feel like, oh, if we have more conversations about this and carry out our, evaluations as we have these conversations and work, what would those top three things be? And I would like to start off with Titi because she just joined us. So Titi, what would you say?
I think the first is funding. To be honest, um, nothing really can be done without funding. So we need to have more talks on funding. We need to become more creative in terms of, uh, putting funding into the sector and really putting the funding where it matters. I'm not to say that salaries don't matter, but we need to make sure that the bulk of the money goes where we can have some more impact. I think so. That's the first thing. Funding, funding, funding. The second thing I would say is, how do we leverage on technology more? The reason why I say that is that with technology, you don't have to recreate and repeat everything. Something that you've learned from one area can then easily be, given to another area without having to duplicate it. So that for me is one of the areas that you can leverage technology for the sector to improve it. So all these lesson notes, and Rhoda and Bridge, who are very confident that all these lesson notes, exercises to do, if one person has sat down and perfected it, then let all the other people use it rather than recreate it in each individual school or any of those things. The other thing I would say is still on technology really, is to say, how do we also leverage on technology to bring resources to the children, bring it closer to the children. So when you look at a lot of digital libraries, that's really what they are doing. So you have these digital libraries that have loads and loads of books, as against the limited amount of books that you can have in your physical school. So what that means is that when children that love reading, get access to this digital library, then they can go so much further than what they have. So for me, it's how do we leverage on all this? There's also cost savings from it in the long run. So we keep having to buy books and textbooks for schools, especially when they're in primary school. And then you're saying, how do we just leverage technology for that once and for all, so that a child might not have the money, but you can tell him that if he has access to a device through any other person, he can actually go and leverage on all these books, instead of having to physically have them. So for me, it's funding. For me, it's technology, and the third one is technology again.
Thank you very much, Titi, for that very great contribution. And I totally agree with you. I feel like as teachers sometimes we feel we're working when we're like doing hard, heavy lifting things. But then if something is already working, why not just adopt it and replicate it? So like using technology to make life easier and more effective for everybody. I believe it's something that we need to have conversations more about being what are your thoughts? Your top three things that we should continue to drive conversations.
Okay, for me, the first thing will be teacher development, would be the people who really are the executors of the sector, the people who really, in the real sense of it, run the sector. We need to have constant retraining, constant updating and upgrading of the knowledge of the teachers, either by encouraging them to do personal development or by sponsoring the development for the training for them at different times. Then secondly would be leadership. Leadership, a lot rests on the shoulders of leadership. So what we have or what we get usually would come on the wings of leadership. We need to have leadership right. We need to put the right people in the right places. We need to have the people who will drive, who will be innovative enough to think change, who will be innovative enough to drive change, and who will be honest and sincere enough to be very transparent with it. And the third for me would be the curriculum. How relevant is our curriculum? How do we see our curriculum to nation building? How do we see the place of our curriculum to the quality of citizens that we have in the nation? How do we see education as as an export product for us as a nation, and handling it, dealing with it, and according to the right place it should it should it should have. So teacher development, curriculum, and leadership would be my top three.
Thank you so much, Ping. And then finally, we'll have Miss Rhoda. What are your top three?
Wow, I think you guys, I mean, between TT and Finny, they've really pretty much said everything.
I was
You know,
wondering what you were going to add. I was saying,
yeah,
wow, thank God I wasn't last. I
I
wanted to be last
know,
though.
I know. As all of you, as both of you were talking, I mean, when Titi was talking, it was my head was the T's. Is the teacher and the technology and the funding, and Titi nailed that. Between Titi and Fifi, they know that when Fifi came on, it was teacher development, and then she went into my world as well, curriculum, and all of that. And I was like, wow, we just all know these things. It's not too much talk, really. People just know, because teacher development, there's like there are components to it that are very critical to me. One is teacher education, right? And that teacher education is both in service and pre-service, and the quality of that is key. And then there's teacher recruitment, because and then when I say teacher education, I mean, who are the people that are entering into the faculties of and colleges of education? What is the requirement for their entry? And so those things are in the world of policy changes. But I don't want to talk too much about my top three things, even though policy is big for me, right? Policy is that, because then policies are exist for people to thrive on, and exist for people to work with a structured framework on how to deliver. And to be honest, we do have lots and lots of policies in Nigeria. They look good on paper. Some of them need to be re-edited and stuff, but they're doing good. It's fine. But if I were to pick one more thing, honestly, if I were to pick one more thing that is a top priority for me, is our commitment to equity. And that for me is a big challenge in the country. I know that we have states that have certain IGRs that can help to fund certain things. You cannot always compare Lagos State with any other state with respect to how much they're going to be able to spend and donate and dedicate to education. So states differ on their IGRs. But I want to see a commitment to equity. I want to see that because every leader will proclaim this, but successful education systems focus on achieving equity in a very strong and deliberate way. And equity is in terms of performance. On our benchmark exams. With equity in building those high performing systems, so that we can because you see, high performing systems use many approaches, so that what do? They use those approaches to minimize. I'm not sure where the background noise is coming from. Sorry. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Sorry. Is that me, or I'm not sure if
No,
it's
I
me?
think it's Mr. Rotimi. I think he's around and he wants
Okay.
to announce his presence. Mr. Rotimi, please.
Okay. Anyway, let me just quickly say that in the world of equity, the reason why I speak about it is because we want to minimize the impact of social background on students' achievement. We really, really want to minimize that. But we don't want it to be as Hillary Clinton used to say when she was campaigning. You said you should not receive a different education because of a zip code. It's kind of the same thing. It's not because of your background. It shouldn't be because of your background or the language you speak or the or where you find yourself in the community that you should have access to a good education, and then that then directly impacts your achievement. And for me, once we are committed to equity, we're going to ensure that our schools work, and that our schools have the right, and that we put people who are in charge of our education systems accountable and transparent to committing to equity. And that's where it is. It's from benchmark assessment to performance to systems to materials and to structure. That I've heard people say, look, it is true that you don't need a classroom with physical walls for learning to happen. It is true. But what happens when rain is falling? When the weather changes, what happens? What happens to people being comfortable? What happens to girls having access to a private toilet that they can use so that they are not out of school because they're on their period? What happens? All these things speak to equity. And so a commitment to equity is going to drive a lot of changes to make sure that every child, whether it comes from what is short charged because of his background. So that would be mine. I'm sure I was talking too much. I'm sorry.
No, you were not. Today we said we need to talk as much as we're working. So no, you were not talking too much, Ms. Rhoda. Thank you so much for such valuable contributions. And Mr. Rotimi is in the building. There's no bell of blessing for you today, because we don't know where you migrated to. We thought you were on sabbatical, but it's so good to have you join us. You just couldn't let us have an all-ladies show today, and I don't know why, but it's so good to have you join us. So we've been talking about
Hello, good morning.
Okay, so we've been talking about are we working or talking? Okay.
Me, I'm working. No, me, I'm not talking. I'm working right now. As you can see, I'm working.
Keep working.
Shout out to Rhoda, roll.
Woo! Shout out to you, right back.
We're in the trenches, so we're far away from Port Harcourt right now. This is Port Harcourt.
Good job, you.
So I'll allow you guys to carry on. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So as I was saying, from all we've gathered, we've seen that it's important that we work as we talk. Conversations have to keep going on, because we need to, as we collect data and work with the data, we assess, how are we doing? Is this method we're using effective? Is this strategy effective? And from all that, our analysts have said this morning, there are lots of areas that need us to keep having conversations around as we work. You know, there's funding, there's leveraging technology, teacher development, which is something that, of course, I have to be so biased about. Because, like he said, you know, the teachers are the ones in the front line. You know, they are the ones that interface with the um, challenges, you know, every day. Leadership, of course, curriculum, policy, and then commitment to equity. So thank you all for making me feel like making me look good. Thank you so much, King. Thank you,
You
Nigeria
are good.
King,
Well,
You're
and thank
good.
you,
You
Mr.
don't
I
look
mean,
good.
Uda.
Grace, you
It's
did
been
a
such an amazing time.
Grace, you did an awesome job of anchoring today.
Good
Well done, well
job,
done, well done.
you, Grace.
Well done. We can just give it to you at
Oh,
this point.
Good job, you,
and
Grace.
let and let Grace take over.
thank you so
Super
much.
cheers.
So now
Super cheers
what
for
our
you.
Thank you
children.
so much.
Rotimi decided to show his video when I said that.
Trust with me. Good job, you, Grace. Good job. Fantastic show. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Rotimi,
Thank you so
where
much.
are you queuing up?
Thank you.
Oh, he's at the airport. Okay.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful day, Rotimi, Grace, and Ify, and Rhoda. It's always a great morning,
Thank
great
you.
morning
Well done,
show.
Grace. Well done, Dean.
And
Well done, Rhoda.
Yeah.
And well done, Kiki.
wonderful weekend to everyone. See you same
Thank you
time,
very much,
same.
everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye,
Thank you so
everyone.
much. Have a
Okay,
fantastic
bye.
day. Mr. Rotimi, thank you for this.
Bye.
Bye.